Welcome back to Questing Beast, I'm Ben. Today we're taking a look at the Haunted Hamlet and other hexes. This is a series of, you could call them adventure hexes, adventure locations created by the Lazy Lich, and these can be fit very easily into his previous adventure Willow, which I reviewed a little while ago, or really any other hex crawl or D&D setting. You can just drop them in there and have a fleshed out, interesting encounter to deal with. It's not just an encounter with some monsters, it's a whole situation, often with a fairly detailed, fleshed out location. Right now, this adventure is available in PDF or in print form. As usual, links to where you can find both of those will be in the description below. Here is the back side or the back cover of our book. Orgel, this doesn't have a summary. It's actually another location that you can explore because Lazy Lich does a really great job of using every single square inch of this pamphlet or this book and putting useful information on there. So this is a little village full of all sorts of monsters like goblins and minotaurs, the servants of a dark lord who was defeated and have now become pacifists and are now running this little town that you can use as a base of operations. There's a series of misfortunes here done by week. Most of the locations in this book have this timeline kind of built in here. I guess you could start the timeline going as soon as the PCs arrive there, just so that as they go off on adventures and perhaps return again, things have changed and the story, I suppose, of this location moves forward. Before we dig into all of the different locations found in the Haunted Hamlet, a quick shout out to today's sponsor. This video is sponsored by Alkander's Almanac of All Things by the Dungeon Coach, a huge expansion of new rules for 5e combat, exploration, and social encounters. The rules are highly modular, allowing you to pick and choose the mechanics that best fit your table. For example, the exploration chapter includes rules for tracking inventory, encumbrance, and wealth, as well as travel systems, random encounter tables, a revised rest system, and downtime rules if you want to take 5e in a more old school direction. Click the link in the description below to check out the PDF of Alkander's Almanac and take back your 5e game. All right, let's see what we get inside the book. Inside our front covers, we have random treasure, basic, advanced, and rare. There's different locations in this book where you can roll up different treasures depending on their rarity. There's some random weather conditions, random day encounter seeds, random night encounter seeds. You can drop these in really any of the locations just to add a sense of tension and to encourage the players to move forward and to keep exploring. If they just sit around too much, things could pop out and they're going to have to deal with them. These things could be directly dangerous. For example, during a downpour in the distance, a group of 4 halflings with lanterns run screaming from a giant serpent. If assisted, they will give the players 2 basic treasures and a coin that proves the players are now friends of the Featherfoot clan. Or it might be something like one of the player's siblings is spotted running away from a wolf. This is actually a pair of ghosts luring players into the Haunted Hamlet. The introduction says that the zine contains 4 location scenarios for use with pen and paper role-playing games. Locations focus on gameable content and being easy to use at the table. Locations are not connected to one another and can be sprinkled into your campaign map however you like or run as one-shots. It's designed for old school essentials, but like most old school stuff, you can re-theme it or re-stat it pretty easily. Our first hex is the gold mine. Last year, a great earthquake opened up a deep gash in the ground after it was discovered that gold deposits have been exposed underground there. There was a scramble among the local lords to claim ownership of that area. So they built a little fort here, little encampments, but as they've dug down, they've discovered all sorts of strange creatures that are already living underground, and they have enslaved them or forced them into service, and you can free them, you can try and get gold for yourself, or whatever PCs tend to do. There's 30 soldiers found at the gold mine with a whole procedure for how this operation works. So you can think about how you might want to disrupt that or what would happen if the players try to disrupt it. There's a refinery here. There's a little soldier tracker down here where you can check off soldiers if the players decide to take them all out. Now the mines are divided into a couple different sections. We have the upper mines, the lower mines done on this kind of isometric map right here. And then the Atkin mines and the Overdark, which is the section right above the Underdark. And it works pretty well because it's in an isometric style. You can see how each level leads to the others. It is a little confusing at parts though, just trying to figure out which areas are open air and which areas are inside caves underground. Like there's a little arch here. So I think that this section here is actually inside the cliff. These are caves, whereas this section I think is exposed to the air. It gets a little bit confusing at times though. So I had a little bit of trouble with that. Another issue is that we have the Overdark section right here. And I read this a couple times and I couldn't figure out how this section was connected to the rest of the location. Do they have to dig down through the ground to get to here? Is this on the same level as this and they can like jump across here? it was never very clear to me. So some more information on that I think would be really helpful if the author ever revises this or does a second edition. There's plenty of different types of factions and creatures here that you can deal with. There are some gnomes. There are the antkin, which is another sort of insectoid race that you can interact with. And the upper mines also contain some mole people. So with all of these different factions, there can be a lot of faction play, there can be a lot of negotiation and a lot of diplomacy as the players try and get these different factions together to rally them against the enslaving human soldiers that are forcing them to work in the mine. I think that could be a really interesting encounter all on its own. There's not a lot of weirdness and not a lot of like strange magic items or tricks and traps so much in this environment. It's mostly pretty straightforward in terms of what you're going to find in each of the rooms. So I think it's mostly going to come down to the way that you interact with all of those NPCs and the way that you launch your rebellion, if that's what you decide to do. Our next hex is the Ladder Inn, which is a very strange hex with a tavern on it that you can drop anywhere in your games. The basic idea here is you got your tavern and there's a little lake nearby, and there is this really long ladder sticking straight up out of the lake. What it's doing there, the people in the tavern don't know. Well, the tavern keeper knows because he actually built this ladder at the request of a mysterious force living in the lake, but he hasn't told anyone that. And at night, people often get drunk. They start daring each other to climb the ladder downwards to see what's at the bottom. There's rumors that it's there's treasure and whatnot at the bottom of the lake. And this mysterious stranger in one corner of the tavern is always offering people potions of water breathing to see how deep they can go. People climb down this ladder, they never come back. But people often forget what happened the next morning, and they just wander off from the tavern, having totally forgotten their companions that have disappeared into the lake. Very mysterious. There's a very nice isometric view of the tavern right here. I love this for buildings because you can really see the layout at a glance. And it's important to know if you want to start climbing the outside of the building, which PCs inevitably do. They're going out windows and stuff. The innkeeper has been collecting lots of gold and treasure from all the people who have disappeared into the lake and is storing it in his room, which is locked. So there's potentially quite a bit of treasure here if you explore thoroughly. There's a write-up of the stranger that's always at the bar. He's actually a seaweed creature controlled by the forces in the lake. And if you fight him or cut him open, you'll see all the seaweed spill out and he'll try and escape to the lake. I like that. That's a nice little surprise. A great little timetable of events happening at the inn. If they stay there for a whole week, things will develop and multiple adventuring parties will show up. Some of them will disappear into the lake, some of them won't. And there's some ladder rumors that you can roll up to see what people think is going on with that weird ladder. And there's even a little chart down here showing what is going to happen if the players make certain decisions. That's really great. It helps with running the game and it just saves a little bit of a mental load for the DM because you can just immediately figure out how everyone's going to react. Almost inevitably, the PCs are going to try and climb that ladder down into the lake and see what's down there. There's a bunch of different layers that they're going to go through as they descend deeper and deeper, some types of monsters. This one is really crazy. It's some undead cloud giant spines. Some cloud giants have rotted away all such as their spines that are now crackling with electricity. And these are swimming around, sort of guarding this layer to the bottom of the lake. They'll let people go down. They won't let people go back up again. The whole mystery here is that there is this giant seaweed entity, sort of a hive mind at the bottom of the lake, and it has been lonely for a very long time, so it wants company. It's been luring people down here by making an alliance with the innkeeper, putting little bubbles of air around their heads and forcing them to work for him. So if the PCs actually get all the way down to the bottom, perhaps they can rally all of the captured folks down here and try and fight their way up. But fighting your way up a ladder when there's these horrible monsters trying to keep you down is going to be an interesting tactical challenge. And we have the Hat Cults Hideout. This is a really fun one. It says 3 weeks ago, an apprentice stole a powerful fusion device and a number of magical hats from a wizard he was studying under. He brought the device to an abandoned cave in the wood, frustrated that the wizard never used the device anyway, and began combining random animals. So you have this nutty wizard cult, and they're just fusing animals together, creating these mutant hybrids and releasing them. This, of course, is causing havoc all over the local area. It's an easy problem, or it's a very straightforward type of hook that the players are probably going to want to get involved with. Lots of rumors of weird animals running around. There's a random magic creature generator here, which I love. So for example, you could have an undead owl wolf, or you could have a bloated ant spider. And then it has some sort of special effect here, often related to its type. I would just go straight across right here. So like a stretchy creature has a plus 10-foot reach, or a bloated creature has an acid splash when hit, and so forth. Here we have the whole hideout drawn in a great isometric style. So again, you can see not only where all the rooms are, but you can pretty much see what's in them just by looking at the picture, which is really the ideal way to do it. You start up at the top and you can fight your way down through this whole maze of rooms, all the way down to the transformation room at the bottom, and perhaps destroy the machine. But players being players, they could easily take it over for themselves, start making their own mutant creatures. They could try and fuse themselves with an animal just to sort of make themselves half wolf or something. You know someone's going to try and do that. And there's just all sorts of mayhem that's going to break out. And that's what I like in an adventure. Not only is there lots of random creatures in this underground cavern area, there's lots of magical headwear, basically wizard hats. There's magical items. There's a list of what's going on right now. There's tons of different combinations possible of the sorts of creatures and wizards and special abilities that you're going to deal with as you plunge into this complex. And of course, you're going to start picking up some of these abilities on your own. And I love that kind of chaos where it's going to be impossible to predict what you're going to encounter. And it's going to be very much up to the players to come up with creative solutions with all of the weird equipment that they now have in terms of how they're going to overcome this stuff. Our last location is the Haunted Hamlet itself. I've got our big illustration right here. Here is our hexagon. The basic story here is that long ago there was this town, and the leaders of the town were confronted by an evil spirit who told them that they could either choose one of them to die and save the whole town, or the whole town would be condemned to a fate worse than death. None of the four leaders would agree to sacrifice their own life, and as a result, one by one, all of the villagers around them died in terrible accidents. The four leaders continued to live into old age before the ghosts of the villagers took revenge on them. Now the whole place is horribly haunted, and if the players wander into this area, they're now trapped in this hex. There's like this wall of mist around it. So they have to solve the problem of the Haunted Hamlet if they want to escape with their lives. The main way that you actually do solve this hamlet is you need to find all of the pieces of the contract that the four leaders signed condemning the rest of the town. If you can find all the pieces, reassemble the contract, and confront them with it, then that absolves everyone, the mist rises, and you're able to leave. If you're not able to resolve that, if you're not able to find all of the pieces, because some of them are pretty well hidden, you're instead confronted by a giant wave of skeletons as all of the villagers rise from the dead. If you're able to defeat them and overcome that combat challenge, you can also get out that way, which I appreciate. So you don't just have to solve a mystery, because sometimes players really get stuck on the mystery, and that can get really frustrating. I do like how what the players have to do is not hidden from the dungeon master. There's a quick reference right here, right at the beginning, telling the DM, is what the players need to do, and here is where all the pieces are. So the DM can have that in their head right away. There is a timetable of events right here, starting from when the sun rises all the way until night descends, and then you're in the middle of the night when the 25 undead villagers crawl out of the pond and try and kill the players. So it's really just from sun up until perhaps the sun up the next day, so really about 24 hours, which isn't a whole lot of time, because whenever the players do some sort of major action, you're probably going to roll a die to see if it switches to the next hour. Maybe you're going to use a sand timer or something like that. And because some of these pieces that they're trying to find are pretty well hidden, I would say the odds are actually rather low, just from my guesstimation, that they're going to be able to find all of the pieces. But maybe a clever party will be able to pull it off. There's 8 major locations here, because you have the 4 leaders that I mentioned before. You have the priest's house, the smith's house, wizards, and the lords. And then this is their actual homes, and these are the main locations that they, I suppose, work at, like the priest's church, the wizard's tower, and then we have the smith's forge and the lord's town hall. Each of these can be investigated. In many cases, you need to pick up certain types of items in one place, take them to another place, and use them in a certain way. Like you can find these blue coins in one location, take them to the forge, where you can use them to forge a key of a certain kind, and then use that blue metal key in another place to open a lock. There's a little bit of a point-and-click adventure game sort of aesthetic to it, which I don't really have a problem with. I like point-and-click adventure games, but those are often quite difficult. Each of the locations typically has a trap of some kind. So for example, the priest's house has a trap. The religious incense starts to burn. Anyone inhaling it will become stricken with a necrotic disease that will slowly rot their flesh. Or the smith's house will collapse on those inside. The ghost attempting to impale the players on sharp splintered woods containing large nails. A lot of these traps don't really have a whole lot of foreshadowing. There might be a little bit of foreshadowing, like Smith's house is described as being very rickety. I would probably throw a little bit more foreshadowing in there just to give players a little bit more information so they can make better choices. Like when they get near the Smith's house, maybe part of it just like falls in on its own so they can see that it's about to collapse. Or you can have the religious incense is already starting to waft out the windows, so they can see that that's a problem and then try and take steps to mitigate it. I think that would involve a little bit more player thought and player choice making, which is the way I like it. On the final inside cover, we have the stats for all the different types of monsters, the horde of skeletons, the hollow armor warriors, a giant animated snake, all sorts of weird stuff that can crop up in the Haunted Hamlet, and some random spooky happenings. As they're wandering around, you can just roll on this table and have weird stuff happen. You can even get the players possessed by one of the ghosts and they can try and exorcise it. So there's plenty of variety in terms of what can happen in the adventure, lots of replayability. All right, that's it for the Haunted Hamlet. As usual, links are in the description below for where you can get it in print or PDF form. And thanks for watching. See you guys next time.